I chose to become a fighter pilot, and in fighters, I chose to become a strike pilot. We had to destroy everything that we could sight in that mission and come back. He said, we've seen a lot of suspicious movement the whole of last night and yesterday and this morning as well in this region. Can you take a look? I rolled into the attack, the first attack. I hit that HMG bang on. So I ejected at 100 feet in a turn to the left, and I landed up, in Pakistan. I had a pistol. I had to bury that pistol because if you get caught, the civilians normally take your own pistol and shoot you with it. I lay down flat there, and 3 hours later, I felt a hand on my neck.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Fauji Days. Today, we have an exciting interaction lined up for you with Air Cmde KC Kuruvilla. In 1971, he was a 26-year-old flying officer in the IAF's 222 Squadron. On December 6, while being pitted against the Pakistani forces, his Sukhoi erupted into flames and he was taken as a prisoner of war in Pakistan. His ordeal lasted almost a year, and for Fauji Days, over 3 parts, he shares the exact details about this sortie, treatment as a POW, the escape plan, and his return to India. Air Cmde Kuruvilla was also decorated with the VrC and holds the record for surviving 3 ejections and remaining fit to fly the frontline fighter aircraft of the IAF. He is being interviewed by Alisha Verma, editorial manager at 99 Beagles and digital partner at Fauji Days. Alisha loves working on human interest stories, and her dream is to create a space for realistic fiction stories.
Hello everyone. Welcome to another special video on Fauji Days. Today we have with us VrC awardee Air Cmde KC Kuruvilla sir. Welcome sir. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking me over to this interview.
It was our pleasure, sir. Sir, you have had such an illustrious career. But before we get to that, I want to start from the start. When did you join the Air Force, and how was your experience in the training academy?
My joining the Air Force I would have to also include a bit of my youth. I went to boarding school at the age of 5, and when I finished at 16, most of the years between 5 and 16, I was flown to various places by my father, who was a chartered accountant in the bank, in the Imperial Bank of the olden days. And being in Bengal Circle, the only way out from there into the northeast was by air. And often, when I reached my destination, the flights would be so early in the morning that I would be collected only late in the evening by my father. Consequently, I had a whole day to myself, handed over from the school to an air hostess, riding in the cockpit, out of the cockpit, no father, into a hangar where I would play around in aircraft or sit down inside a cockpit or in an environment where the engineers operated. And consequently, I developed an interest in aviation. So when I finished school and I came home, my father was in Dhanbad. He asked me, have you thought what you might do in the future? I said, you've been flying me everywhere, and I'm quite interested in aviation because I've spent a lot of time in hangars and in planes. So that's when he told me, he said, do you know there is military aviation as well? That was very good news for me because I didn't know much about military aviation. Within a few months after that, I quickly found out that there's something known as NDA, National Defense Academy. And this was around January of 1961. And very quickly I found out when the exam was. In March, I wrote the written exam, and by June, I had finished all the interviews, got selected for all the 3 services, and my name was out. By May of 1962. So when my name was out in the papers, I was taken quite by surprise. I didn't expect to do so well. And in the selection process, the form had Army, Navy, or Air Force, but it also gave me the option to select all 3. So I ticked off all 3, and I was interviewed for 3 different services, and I was selected for all 3. As a result of which, I could select the arm of service that I wanted to join, and I chose the Air Force, naturally.
Oh, when we read from other veterans, sometimes they have such small, funny, quirky anecdotes when they were young and life was not so serious. And so, do you have anything from the top of your head?
Well, from the top of my hat, I can't think of any anecdotes per se, but I would definitely say this about NDA. It was a huge shock for me. And I realized I was very good in academics and very good in sports. So when I went to the NDA, I realized that this is a place that I have to get through. And what was troubling me more than, it's an anecdote in itself for me. What was troubling me was that it was a cultural shock, because most of the boys who came there were mostly from the north. In NDA, a particular aspect about NDA was that you put it to the boxing ring, and I remember I fought my own squadron mate, which was unlike the thing that was done, and he was from Nigeria. So he almost killed me in the boxing ring, and we are still friends till today.
Coming to your training, now that you have mentioned it, what was, before I ask you about the day you were taken as a prisoner of war in the Bangladesh War of 1971, what was your squadron's role in the liberation war of Bangladesh? Also, because it would provide some context to our audience about our further conversation.
Sure. So, as I told you, I chose Air Force. And in the Air Force, I told you that in NDA, I kept academics as a back seat. So I did very well outdoors. I captained I was part of the cricket team. I was in the boxing, sphere, arena. And after leaving NDA, when I got into the Air Force, I realized that this is the place I really need to come up and shine. And we had all the medalists were from the Air Force at NDA. And I now had said to myself that I have to do as good as them. They were all my friends, they're course-mates. So there was no jealousy, or there was no, I'm going to do this and that. It was just me speaking to myself that I have to perform. This is the Air Force, this is my career, and this is where I have to do well. So in the very first stage of the Air Force, the pilot training establishment, I got the academics trophy. All right. In the second stage, the Harvard stage, it was, I would say, I had an instructor given to me rather late, so I had to cope with that. In the fighter training wing, which was the third stage of flying, I started off well with a very good instructor, and that helped me a lot. And at the end of that training, I won the Sword of Honor, which is first in the course. I got the President's Plaque from Dr. Zakir Hussain, given by Soren Singh. I got the Best All-Round Fighter Pilot, which is called the Chief of Air Staff Medal. And I got the Academics Trophy, which was named as it was the Ramchandani Trophy, which I got. So all these trophies, why I'm mentioning this is, when you stand first, Air Force puts you into challenging positions. So I was sent to 7th Squadron, which is called the Battle Axe, and I had received excellent training there. You in 7th Squadron those days, you didn't get more than 15 to 20 days, meaning you had about a reasonable amount of time to prove yourself and nothing more. All right. And within that period, you had to prove yourself. I did that. And I went on to become a fully operational hunter pilot. And that brings me to your question. From there, I was immediately put on to the latest aircraft, the Sukhoi. So to lead on to your question, I chose to become a fighter pilot. And in fighters, I chose to become a strike pilot. Okay, so in fighter strike operations, unlike air defense, all strike operations are done across the border. So most of the time you're in Pakistan or in enemy territory, whoever is your enemy. And in an air defense role, which also the hunter was, I learned enough about air combat, one versus one, and that would be utilized within the country. So if I was put on a strike role, I'm always across the border. If I'm on an air defense role, I'm within the country. So that's how the transformation from a cadet and to a fighter pilot to become an operational fighter pilot took place. So I was fully operational on the Hunter and I was fully operational on the Sukhoi, and that's when we were ready for war. And when the war broke out, as part of 222 Squadron, from Ambala we moved to Halwara near Ludhiana, and we launched our operations. When the war was declared, we launched our operations from Halwara. So the war per se was not the Bangladesh war. It was an Indo-Pak conflict. Bangladesh had already been created, all right? And Mujibur Rahman, as you know, he was released from jail, became the first prime minister. And all that had taken place, I think, from, if my memory serves me right, from March 1971 onwards. Our war, the Indo-Pak conflict on the western sector, took place in December. And we participated in that operations in December. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
What happened on that particular sortie where you were captured?
Yeah. So your question also, bordered on our role. So 222 Squadron had a specific role. Our roles were to intercept, meaning counter-air operations. Now, I have to explain that to you. So basically, we would take off, go to a particular airfield that is assigned to us across the border, one of Pakistan's fighter air bases. We had to destroy everything that we could sight in that mission and come back. So we did counter-air operations. My particular mission was to Chandler airfield in Pakistan. We went there on the first day, struck it, destroyed targets. Then on the next day, a very other important mission was to the Chistian Mandi railway station. And this Chistian Mandi railway station actually had a tank train, a train full of tanks that was actually being moved to the Amritsar region. And through local intelligence and our own intelligence gathering system, we learnt about this and we struck that place. And that mission also, I hit the engine, and the first track had a tank on it, and it all exploded. A lovely film I had in my aircraft camera, and that also was released to the press. I think the Times of India, World This Week, and Illustrated Weekly, we carried it, all that. And it was in the next mission where Pakistanis having attacked us, they crossed over in the north of Amritsar, that is near Dera Baba Nanak area. So in this particular mission, we had to strike targets near Dera Baba Nanak, including the bridge. That assessment was made by my CO. So we struck one part of the bridge and we struck some other targets there, destroyed them. And while coming back, we had our gun ammunition available. And while coming back, we heard this RT call. RT is radio telephone. You know what that means? It's the way we communicate from aircraft to ground, ground to aircraft. And or air-to-air, aircraft to aircraft. And this particular call came from what we call the GLO, from the Army. So the Air Force supports the Army by positioning one pilot who's known as the forward air controller. So there was this call from the forward air controller to Blackjack 1. That was my CO. I was the number 2 lead aircraft. And he said, we've seen a lot of suspicious movement the whole of last night and yesterday and this morning as well in this region. Can you take a look? All this in cryptic RT language. And my CO decided, yes, we would do it. And so he turned right. So 2 minutes into India, we turned right, and now in another area, southwest of Amritsar, we penetrated into Pakistan, and as we overflew at 100 feet at tactical cruise speeds of 750 kilometers per hour, we crossed and increased speed to 900 kilometers per hour at low level, and we picked up a lot of targets which obviously had halted for the night, for the morning, early morning, because they were moving by night. And one particular description of the forward air controller was picked up by me in the run-in, and it was a heavy machine gun post. And I picked it up. And my CO picked up something else, and we did 2 attacks on that. So a very interesting anecdote I will tell you after this. So I rolled into the attack. The first attack, I hit that HMG bang on, but it was continuing to fire, and that was brought out by the GLO to the FAC, and the FAC said, relayed that, that was a hit on the target. So another attack I did. In the second attack, I blew up this place, and that HMG was destroyed. HMG gun was destroyed. Now, unbeknownst to me, there was a gentleman on the ground watching all this, and that was the Brigade Major, Colonel Chand, now 85 years old, who contacted me after 50 years, year before last. In 2021, he called me up. He found out who I was, just like you were looking for me. And he found out who I was, and I got a call because the Lawrence School Sanawar meet. He found an air marshal, and he asked him, do you know this fellow Kuruvilla? So he said, yes. He said, I've been looking for him 50 years. Then I got this call from him. He was 85 years old by then. And he said, I saw all the attacks that you did. They were extremely daring, and I was worried for your life. And I also wanted to know whether you got any award, because I was the brigade major of 83 Brigade, and your attack killed that HMG, and we were able to move forward and cross the border. So that was extremely, I was so happy to hear that and be able to talk to him. It was terrific. Anyway, so that was the particular mission. After the second attack, now when you finish the attack, you're roughly around 950 kilometers per hour. And then you accelerate to 1100 kilometers per hour. And there, my aircraft shuddered, and I could see that there was smoke. So I actually got hit by some small arms fire, or perhaps there were static, guns, air defense guns, which hadn't been deployed. They were static for the night, but they were opened up, firing generally into the air. And I probably went through one barrage of that fire. And my aircraft then got hit, it shuddered, and started turning left. We had to turn right. So it was an involuntary turn, and my controls started getting affected. So I was cross controls, and then I realized I had to get out. So I ejected at 100 feet in a turn to the left, and I landed up, in Pakistan. So actually, when my parachute opened, I was so low that the tree was higher than my eyesight line, and I immediately hit the ground. And of course, I hurt myself. But does that answer your question about the mission in particular?
Yes, it
Okay.
does.
All right.
How was the journey after that? Did you try to escape from there, or how was that journey afterwards?
Yes. Well, it's a reasonable question to ask, because after hitting the ground, my first thoughts obviously were, how do I get out of this place? Where am I? And which side should I be moving into? But as I told you, the ejection was at such high speed and so at such low level, and in a turn, all disadvantages to me, that when I hit the ground, I actually, after a while, I felt severe pain on my ankle and neck. I mean, both areas had pain. And because I had ejected in a turn and cross controls, my right ankle was already blue by about half an hour on the ground. So as soon as I hit the ground, I quickly rolled up my parachute. I hid it. I had a pistol. I had to bury that pistol, because if you get caught, the civilians normally take your own pistol and shoot you with it. So, I didn't know where I was exactly. So I hid that. I had some Pakistani currency, which I kept. And I had a gold chain around my neck, which I left it there only. And then I started crawling towards the sun, because we took off at 6:15, finished that part of the mission, and by the time this mission finished, it was about 7:15 when I was on the ground, and it was bitterly cold, and I had just my overall, I had a pullover inside, and I started crawling in the due east, and after about 150 yards, I reached a small barbed wire fence, 6 inches or 8 inches above the ground, and I could see it, I touched it, and I followed it, and I found there were tins with stones in it. So, generally speaking, that's a demarcation of a minefield. And when I followed it, I found it was all around my path. So there was no way that I could continue in that direction without killing myself, because you don't know where a mine is. It's located in a particular way. They mark it, only they know where it is. And you can't move around in a random way in a minefield. So I crawled back, and by then my pain and all started to increase. And when I crawled another 150 yards or so due west, this tall elephant grass suddenly finished, and I saw a light machine gun post on my right. And it was, as I said, when I hit the ground, there was a lot of warfare going on there, a lot of firing and tank movements and things. So we were in the thick of battle, and I was in the middle of that. And because I was put down, my CO went back and sent many more missions, and those fellows were firing over my head as well. So I was in a very precarious position on the ground, and the circumstances were stacking up against me. So I realized if I crawl that side, I'm going to get, identified and picked up. So I crawled back, and I decided to wait until dark. They had no other option. And I was directly in line of fire of that LMG post. It had an iron sliding door and small opening. And it was there also that I made contact with 3 people who came out of that bunker. And they were in khaki uniform and green half helmets. That was not our dress at all. And I realized I'm right across the border, perhaps in no man's land. And that assessment was correct. It was the forwardmost picket of Pakistan, and I was in their territory, where the no man's land would start after that. I decided to go back and wait and crawl back, and I lay down flat there. And 3 hours later, I felt a hand on my neck. I had, for days we hadn't rested. There was no food also in Halwara. The civilian cooks and all had run away. And whatever we could get in the crew room, I ate, and that was it. So now I was very tired, and as I lay down for 3 hours, at 10:15 or so, this was the hand that picked me up, and there were 3 soldiers. It was the same 3. I didn't recognize them there, but it was the same threesome, I put it that way, that came back and picked me up. And so that is how I got captured. And of course, when they contact you and you're destroying all their targets and killing their soldiers, I was manhandled and, beaten up and all that, which now I can say. Those days I never used to say it, but now everybody knows the story. So it added to my injuries and all that. And of course, subsequently, we didn't get any medical attention for almost 3 months. By then, when I did get x-rayed and all, those injuries were seen on the x-ray. And the doctors in Rawalpindi told me, yes, you had some sort of hairline fractures because there's calcification very evident in the x-ray. So that was the capture. Right at my capture, throughout, we hadn't seen a single officer. In India, officers lead the battle. On their side, I can't say for certain that officers don't lead the battle, but I didn't see a single officer. It was the Baluchi sergeant who saved my life. And he was a Baluchi because he was very apparently different. I had injuries. The bed was a small bed made of concrete and 2 blankets. That's all they gave us. No food. For 3 days I hadn't eaten there. And my food fetched up on the 4th day. My wife got my first letter after 3 months. So we planned. Immediately we took a decision that yes, we will conduct an escape. And from that day onward, we started gathering intelligence.
Was the escape plan successful?
Friends, our Faujis have been and continue to be the lifeline of our nation. Come hell or high water, they have always been there for us, whether in times of war or natural calamity or any other challenge India has ever faced. And the culture, traditions and history of the Indian military are part of a rich heritage, painstakingly preserved by one and all. To cherish and celebrate this heritage, a unique initiative called Fauji Days has been launched by the budding startup 99 Beagles. So what is Fauji Days? Well, it is primarily an oral history project based on interviews and recordings. Faujis always have tons of stories to relate, many of them inspiring, thought-provoking, funny or engaging, and highly satisfying for the curious, especially young adults in their formative years. These engaging interactions between officers, men and women from our services, with young adults from schools and universities are being captured on camera by us. We want to showcase the diversity of lived experiences on the one hand and the perceptions and expectations on the other. Allow me to also add that the scope of Fauji Days initiative is not limited to just oral history. It also encompasses the written word and the world of military publishing. Already, several books by eminent military authors have been published under this umbrella, and all have been well received by the readers. The Fauji Days website is another crucial resource designed to house the diverse aspects of this project. It features multiple blogs, reference and archival material, and a community newsletter that highlights the progress made, as well as the new recordings and books. Feel free to log on and subscribe. I warmly welcome you to be a part of this initiative, no matter what color uniform a Fauji wore, or whether he or she served on terra firma, flew in the air, or rode the waves. The fact remains that each one of these brave hearts is a reservoir of remarkable tales and cherished memories. Fauji Days wants to share these memories and tell these tales to a much wider audience. If a nation is made of memories, then Fauji Days will prove that Fauji men and women have contributed some of the best. As a Fauji, you can reach out to us and tell us about your rich experiences. Get in touch and we will revert with an audiovisual team equipped to capture your recall. Or if you're too distant, we can guide you about how to record and send it to us. Of course, you can also write your tale and send it to us to be featured here. We have the wherewithal to capture you on video from whatever location on the planet. All we want is to know your story so that India knows her story better. It is incomplete without yours. Please also feel free to send your contributions to this archive of India's valor in the form of nostalgic pieces, anecdotes, pictures, or other content you may wish to share with the wider Fauji Day community. On behalf of Team 99 Beagles, I thank you. As they say, Fauji Days never end. In fact, they are just beginning. So, Fauji Days forever. Jai Hind.